I'm Joe Finsternis. Tonight I'd like to talk to you about the history of zombies, which had their origins in voodoo. On second thought, I don't want this video to be too long. Fuck it. Hi, I'm Joe Finsternis, and tonight I'm going to talk to you about the starting point of the zombie as we know it today. Everyone knows what a zombie is now. It's a walking corpse which eats people, in some cases just the brains, which originated with a different film that I'm not going to be talking about. And we all know that the only way to stop a zombie is to destroy the brain. It just works. All of this started with a little movie called Night of the Living Dead, and tonight I am going to be comparing that classic film with the 3D remake starring Sid Haig. I'm kidding, don't click off yet, I'm talking about the Tom Savini movie, I swear. For those of you who are less familiar with the story to Night of the Living Dead, it's essentially the original zombie apocalypse film. It follows this small group of people who are trapped inside of a house as they're defending themselves during this mysterious wave of mass hysteria. People are losing their minds and attacking other people and eating their flesh, and it is eventually revealed that these attackers are the dead coming back to life to feed on the living. By the way, I almost forgot to mention, I never actually got a new lamp. This one just kind of started working again, and now it's not again. So for those of you who are wondering why it's a little darker than usual, that's why. So to start my comparison off, I'd like to talk about some of the smaller characters of Night of the Living Dead. In both of these movies, there's a young boyfriend and his girlfriend, as well as this woman named Mrs. Cooper. And I would say that the boyfriend is about the same character in both films. He's a likable and helpful guy. Not really much to compare there. When it comes to his girlfriend, in the original, the actress was kind of wooden, to be honest, and the character herself wasn't all that strong. I do think that the acting is slightly better in the remake, and the character takes more charge at one point in the film. And then when it comes to Mrs. Cooper, the wife of this guy named Harry, who I'm going to get into in just a little bit, in the original, she is a very likable character. She's very kind, but as is the case with the girlfriend, she does feel a little stronger in the remake. There's even a point where she argues more with her husband and takes a stand against him. Now in talking about the character of Harry, Mrs. Cooper's husband, he's essentially the antagonist in both movies. Not only in the sense that he's kind of the bad guy, but that he does impede the progress of the other characters and even affects the outcome of their survival in some respects. I wouldn't consider him to be really a straight villain, though. Even though it is very easy to hate his character, in the end he's just this very confused and frightened man trying to do what's best to protect his family. His decisions really aren't the best, but he doesn't know that. There really isn't much to compare here, except that in the remake he's generally a lot angrier and he shouts a lot more. Next you've got this character named Ben, who is basically the main hero in both versions of Night of the Living Dead. He's a very strong, take-charge kind of guy who's just trying to do what's right for the group, at least as best as he can think of. And more or less, he's basically the original version of Rick Grimes. And in both versions of the movie, he has this amazing monologue which leads to one of the most terrifying moments of these films. Now, as far as a comparison goes, in the original, Ben is a very likable character who you can get behind. You would definitely want him on your team during a zombie apocalypse, but at the same time, he does come off as just a little bit cold in parts. In the remake, Ben is being played by Tony Todd, and this might possibly be the best performance I've seen out of this actor. I would even put the character of Ben above his performance as Candyman. I will admit that there are a couple of scenes where he goes over the top, like there's this one moment where he kills a zombie and then screams, "God damn you," into the sky. He felt like he was going a little bit overboard there, but at the same time, there are a lot of layers to this character. He can be very intense and angry, and yet at the same time, there's a lot of vulnerability to him. Like there's one part where the character of Barbara, who I'm going to talk about next, starts making certain suggestions about what they can do. And as he starts reasoning with her and telling her that what they're doing is all right, you can kind of see it in his face and hear it in his voice that he has doubts about their situation. Finally, you've got the character of Barbara, who is the first character that you're introduced to in both of these movies, and she's kind of the one that you're following throughout both films. Although in the original, she once this bad stuff starts to happen and she's thrown into this nightmarish situation, she becomes kind of pathetic as the movie goes along and spends a lot of the scenes in the movie just sitting there in kind of a catatonic state, and she ends up taking a back seat to the rest of the cast. In the remake, she does start off kind of the same way, where she reacts to this situation with utter terror and even starts becoming straight up panicky at times. At the time that the remake was made, of course, she couldn't just go to her local Barnes & Noble and buy a zombie apocalypse survival kit. However, as the movie progresses, she gradually begins to collect herself and even starts to show some intelligence. I've already mentioned this scene where she's talking to Ben about, some suggestions of what they could do in this situation, and she eventually becomes a much stronger character. Now to compare the deaths of Night of the Living Dead. In the original film, mostly due to budgetary constraints, they couldn't show too much carnage on screen, but still, I think the movie very well stands the test of time. It's still very effective to watch, particularly near the end where there's this death scene involving a child zombie. And of course, for the time that the movie came out, it was considered to be extremely gruesome. In the remake, of course, with modern special effects, they were able to add some blood to the movie, and some of the death scenes are a little messier, but it doesn't necessarily add to the effectiveness of the picture, and they even try to redo the death scene with the child zombie, but in the newer version, it's actually pretty underwhelming. And now, finally, to talk about the zombies of Night of the Living Dead. In the original, the zombies are a little less obvious. A lot of them could even pass for normal people. Although they do utilize some special effects in the original, which still holds up very well, at least as long as you watch the black and white version. I've got this version of the movie that's in color, and the addition of color to the movie actually makes the makeup effects look really fake. But yeah, there are some pretty nasty visuals to them. I remember this one particular guy who you see just sitting there gnawing on a bone, and there are just kind of these flaps of skin hanging there from his cheek. And the zombies are still very creepy. They still remain very effective to this day, just as the death scenes do. And what's even scarier about them is the fact that they don't make any noise. A lot of zombies are known for moaning, or in the case of Walking Dead, doing whatever the fuck that noise is, like they don't do any of that in the original, and once again, it does come off as a lot creepier. In the remake, for one thing, you see a lot more zombies, especially at the beginning of the film when you compare that segment to the original. And as is the case with the death scenes once again, there are a lot more special effects utilized. In fact, I don't think there was a single zombie in the entirety of the remake that didn't have some kind of makeup effects work. But they are still very terrifying to look at, of course. You wouldn't want to find one standing out in your front yard. And they also they also feel like they have a little more of a personality and mindset to them. Like, there's a little sequence where you're seeing these zombies out in the yard just kind of wandering around and eating whatever living things they can find, and they almost show off this kind of childlike mindset. So that was kind of interesting. Now, this could really be said for any pair of films, since it's all just a matter of opinion anyway, but as is the case with The Evil Dead, I wouldn't consider you wrong for considering either version of Night of the Living Dead to be better than the other. I wouldn't stand there and ask you why that was your choice. The original film is still scary as all hell, and it's easily one of my top 3 favorite movies that George Romero has directed. And the remake, while it is a little gorier, it doesn't go too far with the gore where it distracts from the atmosphere, and it does manage to maintain a lot of the creepy atmosphere that the original film had going for it. Forgive me, I can't talk tonight. And on top of the fact that the remake has better special effects in it, it also arguably has better acting as well as more fleshed out characters. And technically, I would personally say that the remake is just slightly better than the original film, which is of course no disrespect towards George Romero, especially considering that he wrote the screenplay for the remake. So, if you haven't seen either of these two versions of Night of the Living Dead, I would strongly recommend checking them both out. And that's all I've got to say for this comparison. I hope you all have a good one.